Hey guys, today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Fred. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, MP3 player. That's audibletrial.com/Fred. But for now, enjoy the show. Hello everyone, welcome to day 4 of the 2016 podcast blast. That's right, 7 days, 7 episodes, and 7 amazing authors. Thank you so much for pushing the download button for the 4th time this week. Who knows, maybe it's the 20th time, maybe it's the 50th time, who knows. I'm Frederic Bai, and you're all listening to the Book Geek Unchained, home to literary marvels, those you know and those you don't know. I am a dude. It is snowy outside. It is so cold up here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. It's so like not California, or it's so like not Florida. It's like crazy. But anyway, I'm a bookworm, I'm a writer, I'm a host, I'm a podcaster, I'm a friend, I'm an animal lover, I'm a lover of creativity. I'm a lover of the creative process. Doesn't it fascinate you? And this podcast is about fiction and non-fiction books that we love. Books change our lives. Books entertain us. Books make us grow. Basically, it is a life podcast. It is free every time you download it on iTunes or Stitcher. Please go over there and subscribe. Subscribe now. It is listener supported. It really helps a brother out when you put in a positive review. You know, if you like the episode, put in a positive review, a comment, something, you know. So the way you can do that, like I said, tell a friend, leave a review from our podcast. That's right. Free gifts. You want goodies? You want all the little, cool stuff. Q&As, articles. Go to frederickbaye.com and subscribe. You'll be the first one to know when a new episode comes out, when anything new comes. That's right. I'm writing a few books right now, and I can't wait to share them with you. It's going to be very fun. You can reach me at on Facebook at Frederic Bai, on Twitter at ByFred, or my YouTube channel, The Book Geek. Check it out. Just simply type in my name, Frederic Bai, for previous episodes. All right, guys, as many of you know, I always like to start off with something funny because humor always starts off the day in a positive vibe, doesn't it? Like, all right. Listen to this. A taxi passengers tapped the driver on the shoulder to ask him a question. The driver screamed, lost control of the car, nearly hit a bus, went up on the footpath, and stopped centimeters from a shop window. For a second, everything went quiet in the cab. Then the driver said, "Look, mate, don't ever do that again. You scared the daylights out of me." The passengers apologized and said, "I didn't realize that a little tap would scare you so much." The driver replied, "Sorry, it's not really your fault. Today is my first day as a cab driver. I've been driving a funeral van for the last 25 years. All right, guys. All right. Hey, today we chat with Patricia Johnson and Mark A. Michaels. They are the co-authors of Designer Relationships, A Guide to Happy Monogamy, Positive Polyamory, and Optimistic Open Relationships. The book is a cutting-edge, accessible, and comprehensive guide to the emerging landscape of relationship options, from asexual to single by choice to polyfidelity to swinging. Isn't it crazy in the day and age we live right now where just everything, it's just everything goes on. It's shenanigans, right? It's just shenanigans. Anyway, the book is informed by their 16 years as a pair bonded. How rare is that? 16 years. And they are pair bonded, non-exclusive couple. Their extensive research on relationships, their work with couples, their public presentation, their participation in a pleasure positive community, and their background in Tantra. Designer Relationship challenges the belief that there is a single ideal relationship style, and instead encourages readers to craft and recraft the relationships in a way that works. I loved that interview. You're going to meet two authors who are open and anything goes on. They are honest. They are authentic. I really enjoyed talking with these two. And right now we're going to talk. We're going to get to the conversation right after this. Hey guys, quick thanks to radioguestlist.com, where you can find people to interview for free. Or if you want to be interviewed, you can go there too. radioguestlist.com. Thank you guys for your support. And speaking of you listeners, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. If you would like to be on the show to discuss a book you have written or that you loved, if you have a book recommendation, or you just want to chat, email me. I want to hear from you at info@frédéricbaye.com. That's info@frédéricbaye.com. And for advertisement offers, use the same address with subject advertising. All right, so we are here with Mark A. Michaels and Patricia Johnson. They are co-authors of Designer Relationships. They are a devoted married couple. They have been creative collaborators since 1999, and their critically acclaimed titles have garnered numerous awards. Michaels and Johnson are the authors of Partners in Passion, Great Sex Made Simple, Tantra for Erotic Empowerment, and the Essence of Tantric Sexuality. They are also the creators of the meditation CD, Set Ananda Nidra. Is that do I pronounce it well? Nidra, right? Okay. So Ananda Nidra, Blissful Sleep. You can find them at michaelsandjohnson.com. How are you today?
We're great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so right before we dive into your your book, Designer Relationships, let's talk about a little bit about your background. Give us an idea of who you are.
Oh, how to start?
On the spot. I'm putting on the spot.
Deep background. I'm a lawyer by training. I've got a couple of master's degrees in American Studies, and I, in my late 30s, developed an interest in Tantra. And that's kind of what brought us together and what brought us to writing our books.
In my deep background, I'm a retired opera singer, and and also, yeah. So, and we came together to practice Tantra together, actually. So that's been an interesting journey.
That's interesting. So you were a lawyer and you were an opera singer.
Yeah.
Wow. And how did you come, to write to now, basically, authors of Design Your Relationships?
Well, we blame it on practicing Tantra together because we both had an interest in it. Mark had just finished a tantric training, and he gave a public lecture, and we started emailing, back and forth. And we met to practice when neither one of us were really looking for a relationship per se. But we quickly found out that the practices are very, very powerful, and we both had a really intense interest in the tantric tradition, and that just evolved into a book and a marriage. And
well, marriage came before the book. Actually, the first thing we wrote together was maybe in 2001, I think, was an online course that was designed for people to do via email and to really explore themselves sexually through with a tantric attitude, I would say. And that evolved into our second book, Tantra for Erotic Empowerment, many years later. But it started as a course really focused on self-exploration with a lot of journaling, and that was our first writing project together.
All right. So right before we dive in, to explain our listeners what is Tantra exactly, because some of them might not be familiar with it.
Tantra is an ancient Indian tradition that recognizes sexual energy as a source of personal and spiritual empowerment.
So it's closely related to yoga, and what separates it from a lot of other spiritual traditions and sets of practices is that it embraces sexuality as one avenue for spiritual development. And that's the thing that's made it very, very popular in the West. It's way more than just being about sex, but that's what draws most people, I think. And
it drew
us to it. Yeah.
All right. So your latest book, Design Your Relationships. I mean, it's very contemporary. I hope I pronounce it well. Anyway, but you know what I mean. Approach to sex. What is it about? What is Design Your Relationships about? Well,
the core of it really is that we recognize that in especially American culture, but I think most Canada and most of Europe as well, we live in a society where monogamy has been treated as the default mode, as the one true path in a sense for relationships. And that's really starting to change right now. And the core concept in Design Your Relationships is it's not what society tells you is the right way to do relationships or to have relationships that matters. It's really what works for you. And we're entering a time when we have those options. And so we wanted to provide people with a framework for thinking about what their approach to those options might be.
Yeah, so we include a lot of exercises on how to start having these conversations with your partner and really landing on what works best for you and what your ideal is. The irony of it is while monogamy is the default mode, there's no consensus on what that
actually means.
We ask people in our lectures, and people always, somebody will raise their hand and they go, I know what monogamy is. I know how to define it. And, they'll have one person with one person for their life. And I'll go, okay, so does that include this activity, this kind of thinking? Is it, in one
Can you have close friendships outside of that couple?
And, and what is, and that quickly starts to make people realize that there is not one standard. Now they may have their personal definition, and that's something different. We're saying this monolithic approach to relationships is really
it's not serving people. I mean, I think we've talked about, and I think it was news in Canada as well, as that whole Ashley Madison thing, right? And I mean,
can you remind us, please?
Ashley Madison was this website for people who ostensibly wanted to cheat, and it was a dating site for people who wanted to cheat. Now it turns out that it actually a lot of the time especially the female supposed members of the site were nothing but bots.
So a bot is somebody who, or a program that will reply to emails intelligently and have just continue an online romance with you.
Very few people who joined that site actually did anything more than have a fantasy. And yet, this was the site was hacked and all the information about the subscribers was made public. Lives were destroyed, relationships were ruined. And we feel like very often the people who were on the site had never done anything more than think about it. But it all of a sudden became cheating in the minds of their partners. They might not have even had a conversation about what it means to cheat. But all of a sudden, this online sort of probably pretty harmless activity in most cases was turned into cheating.
Right. So Mark brings up something really important, is that if couples or people in, if they have multiple partners, do not have discussions about what that relationship means to them and what they're seeking for and what does cheating even mean, you can't expect your partner to just anticipate
what your values are.
Right. Because their activity may not, in any way change their esteem and love for you. And they may not see it as anything but a fun thing to do on Saturday night. So.
See, you mentioned people have their own definition of monogamy. What is your definition of monogamy? I mean, do you have and not necessarily, well, I guess you're going to use it for your relationship, but you have one definition for, in general for people.
No, I don't think so.
What we like to do is break it down into 4 components.
Right.
So the first component is sexual monogamy, which itself is not a very clear thing, because some people may feel that, Ashley Madison is cheating, or watching porn is cheating, or fantasizing about somebody other than your partner is cheating. For other people, it really may only mean genital intercourse. So there's a broad spectrum, even within that one category, of how people might define monogamy. The next category is emotional monogamy, which is much more about sort of love and deep connection and pair bonding. And again, even there, it's a little slippery, because we're very emotionally monogamous in many respects, but we don't take that to the point of saying, if you have a deep emotional connection with somebody else, that's a violation of our relationship. Do you want to take the next 2 categories?
So the next one is social monogamy, and that would be your everyday, your social activities. And there are couples that won't engage in any social activities without the other partner present. So any church functions, or if you're going out to dinner with friends, you always come and are as socially
a unit.
And then the final category is practical monogamy, and that's more historically how couples came into relationships with a core project, like a purpose. The reason why you came together is to farm or create a farm, or to have a inn, and you maintain that, and it became your whole life. And that practical monogamy is,
so it's who you live with, it's how you raise your children. It's still very, very much the standard in our society. And even there's some research that suggests that most people who identify as polyamorous are still living in a practically monogamous household, meaning with one partner, and their other partners don't live with them.
And there's a scientific definition that we talk about in designer relationships, and that's that
true monogamy.
True monogamy is one partner for your entire life. And ironically, or not so ironically, it rarely, if exists at all, in the natural world and in the animal world.
And certainly among primates, there's one species of monkey in South America, and the name of the species eludes me. The owl monkey, is it? They are ostensibly truly monogamous primates, but unlike most primates, they mate only once a year. The males have very low testosterone levels. But even among the owl monkeys, some males will steal the mates of other owl monkeys. So they're not really entirely truly monogamous even in that category. So it's really rare in nature.
Yeah.
Do you think, because monogamy, as you said, back in the 50s, 60s, that was it. You had one partner, and that was it, Do you think it created a sexual frustration?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that even currently, people who are maintaining that type of relationship, or if they seek out therapy, couples therapists, the number one of the top issues they address is sexual discrepancy. So where one partner is not getting, as the sexual activity that they like, and then the other could probably use less. So, helping people find that middle ground.
So if you're stuck in a monogamous relationship and you're a very sexual person, and of course in that model, maybe you've never really even figured that out until you're already married. And, one of you is highly sexual and the other is much less so. It's kind of a prescription for disaster. And at that point, the only option is cheating. And what we're really advocating is a move away from that kind of idea of a relationship as proprietary, and the idea that you have to get all of your needs or desires fulfilled by one other person. If you choose that and you make it a very conscious and thought through and discussed kind of decision, that's great. But it also doesn't work for a lot of people. And it's not, one way is not better than the other.
Yeah, I want to point out that there's no right way to be a sexual being. I mean, if you have a high libido, that's just who you are and how you come into the world. If you have little or no interest in sex, you're fine too. Just really land and be clear on what works for you and be centered.
Know thyself. It's really kind of that simple.
In your lectures, you speak to a lot of people. What is the common thread that people come to you with, you know, when it comes to relationships and sexuality?
I think it's why we wrote this book, is because we had a series of students come through and they were coming to study Tantra, but then as we continued to teach and work with them, it became clear that they were seeking ways to have sexual adventures that would not compromise their pair bondedness, and finding ways to expand sexually that wouldn't mean that you, like, if we choose to expand sexually, then we have to divorce, because it just, we can't have both. And we found ourselves
guiding people
through that. And the fact is you can actually, if you've done right, deepen your connection with your partner through sexual adventuring.
I think one of the other things that we've encountered a lot, and it's a very deep idea in our society, and a somewhat misguided one, is the idea that talking your way out of problems is the way to go, and that it's the most important thing that you can do. And we're not saying don't talk at all, but our background in Tantra really has taught us that the much more important thing before you have the conversation is to establish a more psychological or a more emotional, energetic, physiological kind of harmony. So establish the connection without verbalizing. When we verbalize, we're usually trying to win. And in a relationship, that's not really where you want to be. You want to both win.
Right. Mark's right. We really reintroduce the couple or the people into the value of nonverbal communication. And the reality is it's through nonverbal communication, deep eye gazing, that establishes that foundation in which you can fall in love with someone. It's not because you just continued to describe yourselves, your thoughts, your feelings first. You didn't come in and start describing yourself. You probably had a lot of times just looking at one another, seeing each other's faces, seeing where they were. And then those conversations that happen after you have that connection really unfold and become brilliant.
All right, just before continuing this conversation, for you, the listeners of the Book Geek Unchained podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. I personally recommend the audiobook The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, or you can choose the audiobook of your choice for free by trying audible.com. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Fred. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Fred. You will be entertained, and at the same time, you will help a brother out. So, everybody wins. Go to audibletrial.com/Fred for your free audiobook. Once again, this is Frédéric Bayou, and we are talking to Mark A. Michaels and Patricia Johnson. They are co-authors of Design Your Relationships, and they are a devoted married couple. They are also the authors of Partners in Passion, Great Sex Made Simple, Tantra for Erotic Empowerment, and The Essence of Tantric Sexuality. You can find them at michaelsandjohnson.com. All right, you mentioned something very interesting. You said nonverbal communication establishes a foundation. How nonverbal? How do you explain that for us?
It works with your brain hemispheres partially.
Well, talking kind of to go back and reiterate some of what Patricia was saying first, when we're falling in love with somebody, yes, we have conversations. We may stay up all night talking to them, but a lot of what's going on in that early stage, that process of falling in love, is happening at a level that's very different from where we're putting our words. It's happening in the way that we smell. It's happening in the way that we look at each other. It's happening in the way that we touch one another. And people are coming into this very interesting kind of harmonious state. As we get into relationships and that initial heat starts to fade, we have to make efforts, and we have to consciously try to keep that nonverbal aspect of the connection strong. And it's especially important when there's conflict, because if that nonverbal connection is not there when there's conflict, it's much easier to get really polarized. So the process that we teach for the foundational practice that we basically give all our students is eye gazing. It's really, really simple, and it just takes a few minutes a day.
So eye gazing, you mean you just stare the other person in the eyes? You just stare each other in the eyes?
We don't like stare.
Well, stare is too strong, but I mean, you just look at each other.
Yeah, and allow your mind to relax and really just be with that feeling of being present in silence. And it's like magic. What we find far too often is long-term couples or people in long-term relationships of various configurations tend to lose sight of one another and lose touch of one another. And this can really jumpstart their relationship back into that really, where they can really find that deep core of love that brought them together.
Patricia mentioned earlier the brain hemisphere aspect, and that's kind of the little accelerator to this eye gazing. So when you're gazing into someone's eyes, you focus your attention on your right eye and you look into their left eye. For most of us, the left hemisphere is the more verbal, logical, intellectual hemisphere of the brain. And what we're doing when we're looking out of the right eye is that we're giving the left hemisphere a task. Now, this is basically what all meditation is about, right? It's giving the active part of your mind something to do so that you can go into a state where that part of your mind isn't dominating you. And eye gazing is a form of that. So if you're giving that left hemisphere the task of looking into your partner's left eye through your right, what'll happen is that with a little bit of practice, you'll go into this very calm, almost thoughtless state where all that you're doing is gazing.
And it's magical. We use it if we have, to resolve conflict, a little tiff, we'll take a time out and eye gaze. And sometimes it's, you actually forget what was upsetting you. Because it just is such a wonderful experience. Sometimes I'll feel like, okay, world can disappear and just leave me here forever. I love this feeling. So,
and again, what happens is that when you're talking about a problem, it's very, very easy, because that left hemisphere is so engaged, for you to get polarized, for each of you to back into a corner, to try to prove that you're right and convince the other person. That's not really in service of the relationship. That's in service of yourself. But if you do the eye gazing practice and find a little bit more equilibrium, you can then turn and have the conversation from a place where the problem is no longer between you and pushing you apart. You're facing that problem side by side and addressing it
as a team. So we actually recommend that people schedule their difficult conversations. So Tuesday at 4, we're going to talk about money, and if we can handle it, maybe the kids. But from 4 till 4:05 or 4:10, until we both feel, or all of us feel, very, very connected, we're going to take time and gaze into each other's eyes and really speak only when we feel very connected and in harmony.
it takes a lot of self-discipline to do this, and everybody is going to fall short. I mean, there are going to be times when you have arguments. There are going to be times when you don't have the presence of mind to say, okay, let's stop and eye gaze first and then have the conversation, or to schedule it.
Or where you blurt. For me, my big signal is that where you need to do the eye gazing is when I have that little voice in my head that says, I'm right. And if I just say this one little thing, Mark is going to say, oh, Patricia, you are so very, very right. And I was so very, very wrong. And that's not what relationships are about. You don't continually, I mean, no one gets to be right when you're in a relationship. So,
we're going to say something?
No, that's it.
Okay. In the first chapter, you describe many different types of relationships. And I mean, it just seems to me that in 2015, 2016, there's so many people are looking for a partner. I don't know. It seems that people around me, they're all looking for a partner. And it seems so hard now to find somebody who is just going to be, loyal to us, or is not going to, the person's not going to cheat on us. What would you tell that person? What advice would you give that person? Great
question.
I think that if you start out having these conversations, it's really being clear about what you are hoping for, what you are wanting, what your agreements are. That aspect, the cheating aspect, is much less likely to crop up. And not to get all kind of Buddhist about it, I think that also looking for a relationship and really the kind of desperation that is often attached to that search. And I think the internet fuels that.
Right. When you fill out your online profile, it gets more and more like you're developing a mold in which you want to cram some future partner into, like you've already pre-decided who this person should be. And
so I think, being attached to the idea that you need to be in a relationship is a huge pitfall that a lot of people fall into. I've certainly, after my first marriage ended 20 some years ago, I kind of fell into that. I wanted a relationship desperately, and it really wasn't until I let go of that I was able to meet Patricia and be in a place where, wow, I can have a relationship that's lasted 17 years now.
Yeah, and I one other thing too is I too hear about this. People, I really, really want to be in a relationship. I really do. But I think they over focus on the goal, and they don't develop skill sets. And the best way to find a relationship that is to be in the practice skill sets, practice your ideal way of being with somebody, with whomever you're dating. Start out right there. Don't go, oh, I'm looking for something. I'm going to weigh and evaluate you and see if you're going to be that partner. You're not in relationships are a process. They're not something you just stamp and you're done with it. It's a skill set and a process.
I think that related to what Patricia's saying, too often, and I think, again, the internet sort of fuels this because you fill out all these things about what you're looking for in a partner. And it's really, really easy. And again, speaking from experience, it's really, really easy to project your desires for a relationship or for a partner onto a new person. and really, they're not that, and 2, 4, 6, 8 months down the line, you discover it. And
wait, you're not the person I thought you were. Well, you weren't looking at me, were you? You were.
It just seems to me. What are the new rules? Because if there are any, because it just seems to me before you had rules. Okay, the man asks the woman, to marry, and there was a protocol. Now there's no protocol. It's just shenanigans.
There's principles though. So
yeah, go ahead. What are these?
Mutuality, transparency,
respect, and
so and that co-creation. So it's teamwork. It's not like a barter system or, you ask me, I say yes. You want this, I say yes. Next time you do what I want, that's not relational either. So thinking of people have the opportunity to see relationships now as a dynamic co-creative process. It's more artistic and it's flexible. It changes as you age and as your interests grow and change. So those are the rules. It's not so,
In some respects, I'm going back to something Patricia touched on earlier. Although Designer Relationships is a very modern book, and what we're advocating is kind of
it's cutting edge.
An alternative, it's cutting edge. It's alternative to a lot of the conventional wisdom. One aspect of what we're advocating in the book and in our work is something that's kind of old-fashioned, which is a kind of purposeful and mutually purposeful approach to relating. As Patricia said earlier, 150 years ago, rich people married because it was a property arrangement. But middle class and working people married because it was a business arrangement between them and a mutual shared undertaking. And we think that a lot of the problems in 20th and 21st century relationships have manifested themselves because all of a sudden, instead of that practical approach, it became all about you're here to fulfill my every need, not we're here to do something together. And so the more that you can be purposeful in a relationship from the very early stages, and this is work for us, that's really going to build a strong connection.
And I want to point out too, is as people have the conversations that we outline in Designer Relationships, they very well, and we expect a majority will land on being monogamous because that's just right for so many people. We're not advocating for, that somehow an open relationship or becoming swingers is superior or a better arrangement. We're advocating that people really figure out what works best for them.
Once again, we are here with Mark A. Michaels and Patricia Johnson. They are co-authors of Designer Relationships, and they are also the co-authors of Partners in Passion, Great Sex Made Simple, Tantra for Erotic Empowerment, and the Essence of Tantric Sexuality. You can find them at michaelsandjohnson.com. All right. In your book, you talk a lot. You really explore all types, many types of relationships. And a lot of people, many people might be concerned because, if in a polygamy and all stuff like that, you can have an STD. You can have, there are horror stories out there, for expanding our, sexual behavior.
Is it all right if I jump in? I'm glad you bring that up because statistics and studies show that it's not the people in open relationships or polygamous relationships that have higher rates of STI and unsafe practices. It's actually the monogamous people who are cheating. Yeah, they are less likely to use protection. Birth control, which also should be really high in there, and most likely to be having alcohol and drugs, have drugs involved.
That's especially ostensibly monogamous cheaters, but I think you're very likely going to find the same thing in sort of the online dating world. I think people frequently don't have conversations about safer sex, don't get tested. It's much more standard in the alternative sexual worlds. I did want to just jump in on the polygamy thing because it's a very common sort of way that word gets thrown into the conversation. And people associate polygamy usually with patriarchal cultures. Polygamy really means more than one marital partner, but it usually is conflated with polygyny, which means one man and multiple women, as in, kind of conservative Islam and the Church of the Latter-day Saints and so forth, which are very patriarchal. The contemporary forms of non-monogamy aren't typically modeled that way. And there is some research that shows that actually women have higher levels of relationship satisfaction in open relationships than in monogamous ones as well. So, it's not about men, taking advantage of women at all. And I think that's a very important thing for people to be aware of. Let's say you meet a couple and they come to you and they say, we want to have other sexual partners. They've never done it. But they're a good couple. They have a good relationship. What did you tell them on how to prepare themselves for that?
Yeah. And I love that, that they're a good couple and they're really happy. That first needs to be in place. You'd be surprised. People are like, oh, we're having trouble. Maybe we should open our relationship. It might work if you both open and suddenly are enthusiastic and like, yeah, I've always wanted to. You too. I did too. Maybe that'll work. But that's not generally the right time. I would want the couples to really sit down and really look at what is absolutely wonderful in the relationship and what they love about being together and really be clear, write about it, talk about it, have that foundation and have that clarity. Move into then having real clarity and ability to talk about sex. And really specifically talk about sex and what you like and what your concerns are and what your fears are.
So we really advise people to write a statement of purpose when we talk about it for the relationship as a whole, but also if you're going to open the relationship, what are we looking to accomplish through doing this? What are our concerns? How are we going to move forward and do this in a way that makes sure that we're both nurtured and supported as we go through it?
And how are we going to, what kind of things are going to happen that show that we're successful, that this is really right for us? So what things do we hope will help happen then?
And then for practical steps, it's going to vary, depending on where they are. We talk about a variety of options, whether it's going to a kind of clothing optional resort or taking a group couples massage class.
Or go to a sex toy shop together. I mean, that's a sexual adventure, and just start really baby steps.
What I'm hearing is communication.
Yeah.
But communication is it's like beating a dead horse. Yeah, communication. What is your definition of communication? Because we hear that all the time. Yeah. We need to communicate. To have good relationships, we need to communicate. What is your definition of communication?
So communication is not talking. It's understanding and reaching mutual understanding. And I think people think communication, it's like blabbity, 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 blah. And so... Does it? Yeah, yes. I actually did the hand gesture with the blabbity blah. So.
I think that's great. Yeah, communication is not talking; it's understanding and striving to understand. I mean, I think too often people are kind of educated to say that communicating is just venting or expressing your feelings
or your needs. Like, people spend a lot of time defining their needs and really boiling it down, getting the very, very specific, and then they're just making demands on their partner. Well, that's not really communicating either.
That's interesting. Understanding. That's good. That's wow. All right. So what is your take on porn?
Love it.
Because because it's a controversial subject, but it's everywhere. Even if you walk down the street, I mean, the banners, it's not porn, but everything is sex related
constantly.
Yeah. So what's your take on and the impact that you saw on relationships and people?
Porn is adult entertainment. So the adults are there. They're actors. They're highly skilled, and they're there to entertain you.
Yeah, but let me. But kids watch it, like it or not. They begin at 13.
Yeah, I
under cell phone.
Yeah, I don't know. I said I love it. I was talking about me personally, not the child.
Oh yeah. No. I mean, but no, because you said it's an adult, entertainment.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. I just cut you.
Well, I don't know. You want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was big for my age. I grew up in 1970s New York, and there was anything went, and nobody cared about my age, and so I probably saw my first porn film in a theater at 12. I don't think that it scarred me. I'm I'm less of a porn fan than Patricia is at this point in my life. But I think that there is potentially a problem with the way that it's so pervasive and easily accessible now. And I think the problem with teenagers watching it is that they don't have the capacity to realize that it's entertainment. And these performers are not really doing what most people actually do when they have sex. And I think that's a potentially problematic thing. In the 70s, I think it was a little bit different too, because the whole industry was just getting started, and most of the people who were in it it was more real. You know, it was more like amateur porn today than a lot of the more produced stuff that you see. So I got a lot of sex education from watching porn, but I'm not sure that's really as available today.
Right. So the problem exists when people don't realize that it's a fantasy and it's entertainment, and you can learn. There's great educational porn out there. But to conflate that suddenly as if that's how people should behave and what you should do as an individual, or you should expect of your partner to behave that way, when you don't, the behind the scenes things that go on to get that perfect shot, and I guess the pun is intended, people don't realize. And these guys have special physical abilities that's why they're stars. So.
What did you learn from writing your book?
that we need to practice everything we wrote about in order to write.
Yeah, you're really, when you're writing together and
you're in love, you're married, they hold your heart.
And your ego's on the line, and so you really have to have the skills to be a collaborative partnership. And I think we practice what we preach, almost all the time.
So, really, in the world of writing, do you interview many couples that are married and co-authors? Have you encountered many?
No, not yet.
There are a few out there, but not many.
They do exist, but far too often it's like, we don't do that.
What do you think the reader will get out of your book?
I want them to feel empowered and encouraged to really boldly
go where no man has gone before.
Yeah, be themselves and find that, and be in the relationship, Yeah,
I think to find their authentic way of relating is what we really, that's what our work is all about. It's about, know thyself, be as authentic as you can, and have a relationship that is authentic to who you are in this particular point in your life.
Right. And if something works for you, whereas if it went out into the public eye, everyone would look askance and like, oh my God, I'd never stay married to a person who, if that happened in my relationship, know that it's no one else's business how you choose to relate as well. And if something that society, says, oh, you would have to divorce if this or that, and you don't feel like it and you still love each other and it works, or everyone's working together, then just go with it. Go with what works.
It sounds to me that it's almost like the evolution of spirituality in the sense that before you had an establishment, that's how it is, bang, bang, it's A, B, C, D. Now it's subjective. It's your own spirituality. And it just seems that it's the same thing that you're saying about sexuality. Before there was a protocol, and now it's like you make it your own. You wouldn't you agree?
I think that's a very good point.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that. That's beautiful.
And we really think of, because of our background in Tantra, the thing that we've really kept from that is that we see our relationship as the core of our spirituality. And
that it's a spiritual practice. Yeah. Being in a relationship and relating well is a spiritual practice. That in and of itself is church.
Time magazine recently ran a cover story asking, "Is monogamy over?" How would you have answered that question?
We wish they'd have asked us, but we did, and we wrote a piece that was published in Salon.com on this subject. I think the short answer is monogamy isn't over. it's changing. It's now going to be one choice among many others. And we think that's a good thing.
Right. And that's a continuation of the evolution. And like you pointed out, 50s and the 60s, it was assumed you meet one person. There was this protocol, these rules, blah, blah, blah. And now, just in this current day and age, that's translated into serial monogamy, which would have never been possible in the 50s. Like you date somebody for a while or somebody for a while and you just move through several partners. You get divorced, you marry someone else, and that's accepted. That's very norm in our culture.
You say, you say they wouldn't have been accepted in the 50s, but I think, now I'm not an expert like you, but it seems that okay, the women back in this stayed home, but the men, they were not monogamous, but they were just not. It was less shown than it is now.
I think you're right in sort of the broadest sense of the term of that historical thing. I think certainly men, especially in the upper classes, were had access to mistresses and things like that, but it still was stigmatized. And it was not talked about.
Kept secret.
And the ideal husband was not one who had a mistress. It was something that women might be forced to tolerate, but it was not talked about. And we're advocating something that's a lot more transparent and honest, and it's not about, again, the men getting theirs and the women sitting at home and being neglected.
Yeah. All right, that's interesting. Let's wrap this up. How do you describe your relationship and why?
We are pair bonded, and non-exclusive.
What does pair bonded mean?
It means that our primary emotional connection is between us, and it's very, very strong and very, very deep. And that for us is a priority, whatever else we might do.
Actually, in any sort of adventuring or connection emotionally with someone else, it's done also, in service of the relationship. So it's done as long as it fortifies the relationship ultimately. So,
and the non-exclusive refers to being sexually non-exclusive, but also I think socially and to some degree emotionally non-exclusive.
Right.
We do have our separate interests and separate aspects in our lives and strong emotional connection, have had strong emotional connections outside of our pair bond, but only, as Patricia said, to the extent that it serves our connection to each other.
Wow. That's, sexuality is such a fascinating subject. It's a subject that fascinates the world. It doesn't matter what era in history we're in. We're always fascinated by it. Where can we find your book, and where can we find you guys?
You can find it online through the usual channels.
In Canada, Canadian Amazon chapters. Partners in Passion, our previous book, has actually been translated into French for the French-speaking part of your audience. You can also have your local bookstore order it. Et cetera, et cetera.
Or visit our website. The shipping is a little intense to Canada, but for your U.S. Listeners, if you order it from our website, we'll sign a copy.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, Mark and Patricia, thank you very much. This is, like I said, it's such a fascinating subject. I feel I could talk to you forever. But thank you very much for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really great to be on the show.
All right, guys. Thank you so much to Patricia Johnson and Mark A. Michaels. That was a fun interview. That was insightful. Hey, you know what? Sex is always a subject that fascinates most of us. It's always something that it doesn't matter which era we're in. Like I said during the interview, it doesn't matter which era we're in. We're so confused, and we have so many questions when it relates to sexuality. And their book and these two can really, really help us answer these questions for ourselves. You know what? I felt more normal speaking with these two. And anyway, we all have fantasies, and So that was really fun. Hey, that's it for me for the day. It's time to ride off into the sunset. So, catch me on Facebook, Fred By, on Twitter at ByFred, the YouTube channel, The Book Geek, for previous episodes. And tomorrow, we're gonna you're gonna get a breeze, a fresh joy, a fresh air. We're gonna have the ambassador of happiness, Maura Sweeney. And I'll tell you what, guys, you will fall in love with her the first time, with the first word that she utters from her mouth. I decided it was supposed to be a 1-part episode. Just one episode turned out to be 2 episodes because the conversation was so interesting. I can't wait to share it with you. That's going to be on day 5 of the 2016 podcast blast. That's right. After that, we go back to our regular schedule. So with this, I want to tell you, stay safe and don't forget, live with purpose, passion, and love.